The telescope whined as I forced the gears, my eye pressed against the frigid eyepiece. Hours of scanning the same patch of sky, chasing blurry nebulae and pinpricks of distant stars. My obsession bordered on madness, the desperate pursuit of any flicker that might betray alien existence. Sarah, my long-suffering wife, said I was chasing ghosts, that it was time to give up this childish fantasy. But somewhere deep in the cosmic vastness, I clung to an unshakable belief. We were not alone. Suddenly it happened. A flash, not the gentle twinkle of a distant sun, but a searing burst so bright it burned the image into my retina. Blinded, I stumbled back, my heart pounding a panicked rhythm against my ribs. By the time my vision cleared, the sky was empty, once again an indifferent canvas of stars. Had I imagined it? A trick of tired eyes. I rubbed at the dull ache behind my temples. It was well past midnight. Exhaustion twisted logic into strange shapes. Yet a nagging unease wouldn't leave me. My hands fumbled back to the telescope controls, settling on the coordinates where the anomaly had appeared. Nothing, just the same celestial tapestry I'd been staring at for countless nights. I waited, breath held, some irrational part of me expecting the flash to return. Nothing. Disappointment washed over me, mingled with the familiar pang of self-doubt. It was time to pack up, admit defeat for the night. As I reached to dismantle the telescope, a wave of vertigo crashed over me. The ground seemed to tilt, the stars swirling. I stumbled, my stomach lurching, and then darkness. I awoke with a groan, my head throbbing. Disoriented, I squinted against the sting of harsh sunlight. Where the hell was I? My backyard was gone, replaced by a sterile metal room with no windows or discernible doors. The air buzzed with a low hum, the cold floor sending shivers up my legs. Panic flared. How did I get here? My last memory was of the telescope, and then nothing. Pushing myself to my feet, I pounded against the smooth metal walls of my prison. It yielded only the echo of my own frantic heartbeat. I spun in a circle, a desperate animal searching for a way out. Fear choked my breath, a cold sweat clinging to my skin. The hum in the room changed pitch, rising to a shrill whine that set my teeth on edge. Abruptly the whine cut, followed by a soft hiss as a rectangular section of the wall slid open. I recoiled, my body tensing. A figure stood silhouetted in the harsh light pouring in from the opening. Tall, impossibly thin, its form was obscured by the glaring brightness. Two huge, almond-shaped eyes glinted in the shadows, reflecting the fear that squeezed my heart. "Do not be alarmed," a voice whispered in my mind. It wasn't a voice of sound, but something deeper, vibrating the very core of my being. Confusion and terror warred within me. Was I hallucinating? Had I finally snapped? The figure stepped forward and I recoiled, slamming into the wall behind me. It was undeniably, inhumanely real. Its skin was a smooth, pearlescent grey, almost translucent. The oversized head pulsed slightly, thin veins visible against the skull. The black pupil-less eyes locked onto mine, sending shards of icy dread through me. An arm extended, long spindly fingers tipped in razor-sharp claws uncurling. I choked back a scream, scrambling backward. The floor was suddenly slick beneath my feet and I tumbled, landing hard on my side. As I struggled to regain my footing, the figure approached, its movements unnaturally fluid, almost predatory. My mind raced, searching for escape, for a weapon, for anything. Then just as suddenly as it began, it was over. My body went limp, overcome with an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. The alien's eyes flickered, a pulsation rippled across its skin, and it turned, dissolving into the blinding light of the opening. The wall hissed shut, plunging me back into oppressive darkness. I lay on the cold floor, my mind reeling, refusing to accept what had transpired. It had to be a dream, some nightmarish manifestation of my obsession. Yet a nagging voice of doubt whispered otherwise. Scrambling to my feet, I pounded on the wall again, begging for answers, for any kind of explanation. Only silence echoed back. Hours must have passed. Or had it been days? I couldn't tell. Desperation gnawed at me. My frantic pacing wore a groove into the metallic floor. Memories of Sarah flooded my mind, her smile, her gentle touch, the concern etched in her eyes the last time I'd walked out the door with my telescope. Tears welled up, hot against my cheek, and I sank to the floor, defeat crushing my spirit. A soft chirp pierced the silence. My heart leaped. A sliver of light appeared near the base of the wall, a narrow panel barely big enough to fit a hand through. Fumbling closer, I noticed a small tray had slid out, holding a single pale cube. Food. My stomach growled in protest, its emptiness a harsh reminder of my human needs. Staring at the unidentifiable cube, I hesitated. Was it poisoned? A test of some kind? Yet, the hunger twisting my gut was overpowering. I snatched up the cube, scrutinizing it, smooth, odorless, featureless. With trembling hands, I lifted it to my lips. The cube dissolved on my tongue. A wash of warmth flooded my body, chased by a surge of energy. The headache that had plagued me faded. I felt invigorated, my despair replaced by a strange sensation of resilience. Was I going mad? I pushed away from the wall, my steps firmer now. There was something different about the room, a subtle shift I couldn't quite place. My fingers traced a hairline fracture along the wall, the same wall I'd pounded on relentlessly only hours before. Hope, faint but persistent, flickered inside me. My gaze settled on the spot where the alien had first appeared. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and walked towards the emptiness. A wave of nausea washed over me, and fear squeezed my heart. Gritting my teeth, I took one last step forward, and fell into blinding light. I tumbled through a vortex of swirling colours and disjointed sound, a cacophony that threatened to shatter my sanity. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the chaos ceased. I slammed onto a hard surface, gasping for breath. My vision blurred, swirling shapes gradually resolving into focus. I was back in my backyard. The telescope stood sentinel against the twilight sky, the gears frozen in the exact position I'd left them. But something was wrong. The air shimmered, distorting the familiar landscape. I blinked, and a flicker of movement in the treetops caught my eye. My blood ran cold. Perched precariously on the branches was the alien. It cocked its head, those unnerving eyes studying me with unsettling curiosity. I stumbled back, tripped over my own feet, and landed hard on the grass. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it would burst from my chest. Logic screamed at me to run, but a strange fascination held me rooted to the spot. The alien tilted its head again, then with an unexpected swiftness unfurled translucent wings and launched itself into the air. It circled overhead, its movements mesmerizing, then with a single powerful flap vanished into the deepening dusk. I remained there, sprawled on the cool grass, staring up at the fading light of day. Was it over? Had it simply been observing me? My mind grappled with the impossibility of it all. An alien, right here in my backyard, examining me like an insect under a microscope. A movement in the bushes snapped me back to the present. Sarah emerged, her brow creased with worry. She rushed to my side, her relief at finding me turning into a frantic search for injuries. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could I tell her I'd been abducted by aliens? Forcing a shaky smile, I brushed her concern aside. "Rough day at work," I mumbled. "Needed a nap." The lie hung in the air, heavy and false. Sarah looked at me, a flicker of doubt in her eyes that twisted a knife in my gut. The night stretched on, an eternity of troubled sleep broken by vivid dreams, flashes of the sterile room, the alien's piercing gaze, and a sense of something looming just beyond the reach of my understanding. The days that followed were a blur of forced normalcy. Sleep became a torment, my dreams invaded by those unblinking black eyes and the alien's telepathic whisper echoing in my skull. I woke each morning drenched in sweat, my body trembling, unable to shake the overwhelming certainty that I wasn't alone in my own mind. My obsession with the telescope intensified. I found myself watching the night sky with a mixture of dread and anticipation, hoping, yet fearing, the alien would return. Sarah's concern deepened, manifesting in gentle prods to see a doctor, to talk to someone. I pushed her away, unable to admit that the very foundation of my sanity was crumbling. One morning I awoke to find a strange symbol scrawled on my bathroom mirror. Jagged lines intersected to form a pattern both alien and oddly familiar. I stared in a horrified trance, my mind racing. It was the same symbol that had haunted my dreams since the abduction. Desperate for answers, I turned to the internet, the last refuge for every desperate soul with an unexplainable experience. Hours of frantic searching led me to an obscure site filled with grainy UFO photos and outlandish alien encounter stories. Buried deep within the site's archives, my stomach lurched as I found the symbol, a recurring motif in ancient civilizations around the world. Could it be? Then a name caught my eye. Dr. Evelyn Maddox, a fringe physicist obsessed with the notion of alien communication. Her theories were dismissed as lunacy by the scientific community, but a wild hope ignited within me. Had she deciphered the alien language? Were these symbols a way to communicate with them? I reached out to Dr. Maddox, my email a jumbled confession of my experience and a desperate plea for help. To my astonishment, she responded. Her message was short, cryptic. "The patterns are the key. Come to me." With a mixture of apprehension and desperate hope, I printed out Dr. Maddox's address. There was no going back now. I owed it to Sarah, to myself, to confront this bizarre reality that threatened to consume me. I had to find the truth, no matter the cost. Dr. Maddox lived in a secluded cabin perched on a windswept cliff overlooking the ocean. I arrived on a stormy afternoon, the rain lashing at my car, the sky mirroring the turmoil within me. Stepping out, I braced against the gusting wind, an unsettling premonition washing over me. A hunched figure clad in a tattered raincoat emerged from the cabin. Dr. Maddox was older than I'd expected, her face a map of wrinkles etched by a lifetime of ridiculed obsession. Yet her eyes burned with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Come," she rasped, leading me into the dimly lit cabin. Papers, star charts, and strange contraptions littered every surface. An unsettling feeling of familiarity crept over me, as though I'd stumbled across remnants of my own feverish nightmares. The physicist thrust a worn leather-bound book into my hands. "The key," she croaked. "It's all here. For centuries they have tried to contact us, warn us." I flipped open the book, the pages filled with strange symbols and diagrams, eerily familiar. My heart pounded in my chest as I recognized my own mirror-scrawled symbol embedded within elaborate circular patterns. "These aren't just random markings," Dr. Maddox explained, her voice gaining fervour. "They are equations, complex mathematical codes describing the fabric of reality, wormholes, alternate dimensions." Her voice trailed off, replaced by a frantic scribbling on a whiteboard. I stared, transfixed and terrified, as she filled the board with intricate calculations. My limited understanding of physics left me floundering. Yet the patterns she drew echoed something that lurked in the back of my mind, a tantalizing thread I couldn't fully grasp. "They're building it," she declared, her voice trembling. "A doorway through space and time. And they're using you, Jake. You're the conduit." "Using me?" I forced out, my world tilting off its axis. "How?" She pointed a gnarled finger at my wrist. "They marked you, Jake. That night they implanted something. Your body is now a beacon, guiding them." My blood turned to ice. I thought back to that strange cube, the surge of energy. Had it been a tracking device, a way to manipulate my physiology? "We have to stop them," Dr. Maddox said, her voice filled with urgency. "It's not about alien invasion like the movies. It's about something much more dangerous." I stared at Dr. Maddox, my mind racing. Could her wild theories possibly be true? I should have turned and run back then, back to my predictable world of work and Sarah. But a perverse curiosity held me in place, a desire to peel back the layers of this cosmic horror show and discover the shocking truth. "What do you mean, more dangerous?" I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. A haunted look crossed the physicist's face. "They're not conquerors, Jake. They're collectors. They study civilizations, manipulate them, play experiments." She gestured wildly towards the scrawlings on the whiteboard. "They manipulate dimensions, timelines, realities. To them, we're nothing but specimens to be analysed, dissected." A wave of nausea washed over me. Had I been nothing more than a lab rat in this alien experiment? I thought of Sarah, her face swimming before me, the thought of her becoming entangled in this madness filling me with dread. "We have to stop them," I choked out, a strange sense of determination rising from the ashes of my fear. A ghost of a smile crept across Dr. Maddox's face. "There is a way. You hold the key, Jake. The night they took you, you were changed. Your mind resonates on a frequency only they can hear." She gestured towards a bizarre device dominating the corner of the room, a tangle of copper wires and blinking lights surrounding a cracked porcelain dish. "I've built a transmitter. We can use you to send a message, a disruption in their patterns. It could overload their system, buy us time." "Time for what?" My skepticism warred with the flicker of desperate hope in my heart. Time to find their location, their doorway. Dr. Maddox's eyes glittered with a terrifying intensity. And destroy it. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to walk away, to deny this madness. But a stronger instinct whispered that to do nothing was to condemn myself, and perhaps all of humanity, to an unimaginable fate. Steeling myself, I nodded. Let's do this. We spent the next few hours adjusting the makeshift transmitter, Dr. Maddox muttering equations under her breath. Time warped strangely in that isolated cliffside cabin, a sense of impending doom hanging heavy in the air. The storm outside raged in sympathy with the chaos brewing within me. Finally she turned to me, her eyes gleaming with manic fervour. It's time, Jake. We must connect you. Her words were ominous, hinting at a transformation I wasn't sure I was ready for. She directed me to stand inside the circle of wires, a cold dread seeping into my bones. My wrist throbbed, a persistent reminder of the alien tampering. Dr. Maddox flipped a series of switches, and the device hummed to life, casting an eerie blue glow. Pain seared through my arm, emanating from my wrist, spreading like fire throughout my veins. I gritted my teeth against a scream, my vision blurring. A voice echoed in my head, the alien's telepathic whisper, not of words but of images. It saw me, felt my fear, my defiance. And within the alien's probing, I sensed something else. A location. Flashes of swirling sand dunes, an obsidian structure thrusting upwards from the barren landscape, an impossible beacon piercing the desert night. I have it, I gasped. Images burned in my mind, as tangible as any memory. The pain subsided as abruptly as it had started. Slumping to the floor, I blinked away the blinding spots dancing before my eyes. Dr. Maddox stared at me, a mix of astonishment and grim determination marring her features. "They used you as a beacon," she murmured, "and now we shall do the same." She returned to the transmitter, hastily scribbling a new equation, her fingers trembling. Their language, their coordinates, encoded into a disruptive signal. It's a long shot, but it may be our only chance. As she flipped the activation switch, a surge of power coursed through me. The world tilted, colours swirling in a sickening kaleidoscope, then a sudden crushing sensation, as though my very being was being squeezed through a pinhole, and then darkness. I awoke to the sensation of scorching sand beneath me, the taste of copper in my mouth. Groaning, I pushed myself upright and blinked against the blinding glare of an unfamiliar sun. My surroundings swirled into focus, towering sand dunes stretching in all directions, the oppressive heat baking my skin. The obsidian structure I'd visualized in my mind loomed ahead. Twisted and angular, it looked like a shard of night embedded in the desert landscape. An alien creation, pulsating with an unsettling energy. This was their doorway. Dr. Maddox sat beside me, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. "It worked," she croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The signal scrambled their tracking, transported us here." I stared at the ominous structure, the sense of responsibility and abject terror warring within me. We had gone from the hunted to the hunters, yet our chances were slim at best. "Now what?" "We infiltrate," she replied, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "We find the core of that structure, and we destroy it. We shut them out for good." With a heavy heart we approached the structure. There was no sign of guards, no visible defences. The obsidian walls were smooth, devoid of any entry points. A growing unease settled over me. This was all too easy. We circled the structure, searching for some hint of a way inside. Then I noticed it. A faint indentation in a recessed section of the wall, shaped uncannily like a human hand. A cold certainty washed over me. They were expecting us. Without a word I approached and placed my palm on the indentation. A jolt of electricity shot through me, followed by a deep hum. Slowly, a portion of the wall shimmered, then dissolved into an arched opening. "It's a trap," I managed to say, but it was too late. Dr. Maddox's eyes gleamed with a fanatical zeal. "Of course it's a trap," she hissed. "But maybe we're exactly what they've been waiting for." Before I could protest, she stepped through the opening. Gritting my teeth, I followed. The interior of the alien structure was a stark contrast to the barren desert. Corridors of smooth, polished metal stretched into infinity, lit by a pulsing bioluminescent glow. The air thrummed with an energy that set my teeth on edge. We moved silently, the eerie silence amplifying the pounding of my heart. Dr. Maddox's face, illuminated by the strange light, contorted into a mask of feverish determination. She clutched a battered leather satchel, its contents a mystery that further stoked my unease. Rounding a corner, we stumbled upon a vast chamber. My breath caught in my throat. The aliens, dozens of them, moved with hypnotic grace amidst banks of flashing consoles and towering crystalline structures. I froze, the weight of their emotionless gaze settling upon us like a shroud. Had we walked directly into the heart of their operation? Suddenly Dr. Maddox lunged forward, her shrill scream echoing through the cavernous space. "For humanity!" She hurled the leather satchel towards the central crystalline pillar. The aliens reacted in a flash, but it was too late. The satchel exploded in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. The aliens recoiled, their movements becoming frantic, disjointed. The consoles sparked, the luminescent glow flickered erratically. Dr. Maddox grabbed my arm, her eyes ablaze with a triumphant madness. "Run!" Chaos erupted. Disoriented aliens staggered and collided, their telepathic communication seemingly disrupted by the blast. Seizing our chance, we bolted back through the maze of corridors, explosions rocking the structure behind us. We burst back out into the blinding sunlight. I turned, expecting to see the obsidian structure collapsing. Instead, it remained intact, the pulse of power within seeming to grow even stronger. A wave of despair washed over me as I realized Dr. Maddox's plan had failed. But then the unthinkable occurred. The sand at our feet seemed to liquefy, swirling upwards like a vortex. With a surge of terror, I felt myself being pulled downward, the world disappearing in a maelstrom of sand and scorching wind. My last glimpse was of Dr. Maddox, a look of pure horror finally replacing her fanatical resolve. And then there was only darkness and the overwhelming sensation of falling.